You're listening to the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Last Call, where Kevin, Wendy, and Brent talk about anything and everything that couldn't quite squeeze into the regular show. Today we talk about Orphan Black, Dragon Con, Lost Girl, Sharknado 3, Con Man, The Last Ship, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, The Almighty Johnsons, Xena, The X-Files, Dark Matter, and Continuum. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's see what Kevin's got for us.
Alrighty, got 3 items for us today. First off, I wanted to mention that I got an opportunity to moderate a Orphan Black Podcasters Roundtable. Folks who would do some Orphan Black podcasts, some of which you've, I think, heard here on the show, or promos certainly for. Chris from Tatiana's Everyone was on there, also Karen Lindsay, who does the Orphan Black podcast, and has been a co-host here on our shows several times. And Mark DeCote as well, who's you hear occasionally leaving feedback for us and such. Them and a couple of other Orphan Black podcasters. This is the second year I've moderated one at the end of the season where they all get together to talk about it. So if you're a big Orphan Black fan, it's easily over like an hour and a half. It's lots of the topics and things that came up this season. So if you want to hear some folks who are used to talking about the show and have a lot of passion for it, follow the link in the show notes. I think you'll enjoy it.
That's cool. Was the consensus this season, that it was not quite as strong as last season?
I don't know if I'd say it's consensus, but certainly some of the people very much like the Lita clones, and we're glad that the caster stuff kind of eventually dwindled down by the end of the year. Some folks found it interesting, but some folks not so much.
Yeah, it seems like people have had sort of mixed views on that season.
I'm one of the not so much ones, so I'm kind of glad it's behind us. I hope the best stuff for Orphan Black is to come. But right now, looking back, I'd say the best stuff is the first couple of seasons. So I'm hoping it gets better. But you left off one of Karen Lindsay's best credits, co-host of the Scaper Chronicles for the Scapecast, Kevin.
Well, I had to leave something for you to talk about too. I can't it all. And speaking of folks who have guest hosted here on our podcast, also this week, a link in the show notes to an interview that we did over on our Arrow Squad podcast with Kelly Harkins, who's been a host here as well, since she runs the American Sci-Fi and Fantasy Media track at Dragon Con, which covers the show Arrows. And actually, we had her on there to talk about some of the big Arrow guests and Arrow panels that are coming up at Con in just a few weeks. So it was a lot of fun to have Kelly talking about some of those guests, Stephen Amell and the folks from The Flash TV show that are also coming, and some of those celebrity Q&As, and also she's got a couple of Arrow fan panels and Flash panel and such. So some fun stuff, certainly, if you're an Arrow fan or you're someone who's interested in coming to Con. I think you'll enjoy getting a little more detail on some of the stuff she'll be putting on.
Yeah, Kelly does a great job with the programming for that track. So definitely looking forward to the Arrow panel. Hopefully this year is the charm and Stephen Amell's schedule doesn't change so he can actually show up.
Very cool stuff, man. Very cool.
And my final item, sticking on the Dragon Con topic, since you folks know how much I love it and how much Wendy and I enjoy the con and stuff. They announced a new guest, and again, every year there's close to 400 of them, so I've got to admit, by 10 years in, while I love seeing certain guests, most of it's just kind of routine of, oh, that's a nice person. Hope to see them a little bit. They announced that Anna Silk will be attending for the first time this year from Lost Girl. Which is pretty amazing. They have almost the entire primary cast of Lost Girl coming. Ksenia Solo, Chris Holden-Reed, Zoe Palmer, Rachel Scarston, Paul Amos. It's pretty amazing to have them all together at one con, and certainly with the finals, the back half of Season 5 starting up this fall. That was exciting news. I don't tend to get all that excited for, celebrity Q&A panels, but I'm definitely going to try to find a way to, make sure I can clear some time to get to see all those folks together. Would just be pretty amazing stuff, especially being as much of a Lost Girl fan as I am. So that was a major coup for the con, and going to be very exciting if they all make it to have them all together. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that was really good news to hear. It's a great timing that you sort of get the full house of the cast going into the finale. I'm sure it's going to be a really fun panel. It's definitely on my must-attend list right now.
Even though, they stopped filming this quite a while ago, it's a farewell panel for us for the final episode, so it's kind of pretty cool. I'm looking forward to somebody, hopefully, putting out some video or audio of that particular panel. That'd be fun to watch or listen to.
Yeah. Hopefully, in the next week or two over on the Fae Files podcast, I'm hoping to have Carol Malcolm, who's the director of the Urban Fantasy track that covers Lost Girl, on to talk a little bit. But the goal is always to do at least a couple of those celebrity Q&A panels during the course of a weekend, depending upon everybody's schedule. So the Lost Girl fandom is very rabid, and the video recordings of all the guest panels from theirs last year are up online. So the same way, Brent, same idea, hoping they'll be up again for everybody to be able to enjoy. And that'll do it for me this week.
All right. Wendy, what do you have for us?
First, I got a couple links to carry over from the Bane show. First is about Sharknado, because even Sharknado 3 cannot escape the juggernaut that is Game of Thrones. So there actually is a George R. R. Martin cameo in Sharknado 3. He actually had dialogue that got cut, but it will be on the bonus DVD.
It's going to be something about Game of Thrones in his dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a very famous line.
Winter is coming.
He might say, yeah. When will this ever end? Winter's coming.
Yeah, it was neat seeing him in there and all the other celebrity cameos. But yeah, that was a nice one they kind of kept under wraps.
Yeah, that was one where I had no idea. But then I actually learned he had the cameo before I watched it, because I had TiVo'd it. So then I was sure to be watching for him. The other thing I wanted to mention was a link to a little sit-down that Alan Tudyk and Nathan Fillion did, talking about how they came up with Con Man, the web series that Alan Tudyk writes and Nathan is in. There's also some very interesting discussion about how they want to incorporate as many of the actors from Firefly in the series. They got over half of them in the first round. Marina Baccarin wasn't available because of, I think, filming as well as Gotham. She's filming a movie, and I think she's in Deadpool, and Gotham scheduling, but so she's on their get list for season 2, and they talked about a very funny idea for Adam Baldwin's character that you have to follow the link to learn more about.
Well, that sounds awesome. You have to tell me, since I haven't been able to see this yet, is the Adam Baldwin appearance going to have anything to do with his role in The Last Ship? Come on.
Well, his knowledge of weapons is certainly part of the character. That's all I'm going to say. Oh my goodness,
we're going to get a Vera comment or something? Oh, this could be cool. Yeah, no, these guys, I mean, I know a lot of folks getting very excited. I think the very end of September, they're going to drop things when that starts. But my goodness, you talk about like cameos in Sharknado 3, the cameos in this one, along with people who are going to be in it. Yeah, it's going to be so exciting as a geek.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And partially it's because both Adam and Nathan talked about conventions, and they're like, if you don't understand why these conventions are cool, especially not the huge things like San Diego Comic-Con, but the conventions where you go to and it's in a medium-sized city and all the guests end up sort of intermingling with each other as part of the day, and just the enthusiasm that people have for these different shows or whatever their interests are, if it's gaming or other things, that comics that are also part of the convention. So it really sounds like, and from the couple little bits I've seen, they sort of capture that as part of this series, which I hope they really nail, but I have a good feeling about. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, speaking of Adam Baldwin, is his current show, The Last Ship, and the most recent episode, number 6. This is the one where Chandler and some of the gang go in search of the sub-commander and what they're doing on land, I'll say. And first, they stop off at the lab of Dr. Scott's mentor, who they get a video and they know he's dead. But it was still really sad when they go see the lab all shot up by these pirates, essentially. And but they also get a clue that he had been working on some research that can help Dr. Scott, because they really needed the infrastructure of a lab in order to create more of the cure. And instead, the mentor had been working on an aerosolized version of measles vaccine, and Rachel gets the idea that maybe she can do that for this, so she wouldn't need all that overhead to do that. And there was a really interesting sort of watching her brainstorm with the chef's cook and the new surgeon who's come on, to see them sort of go off on a new, technical problem solving path, for this season. Cause, last season it was all about the cure itself. Then you have Chandler, going to find what turns out to be the cult and sort of infiltrating it as, some of the people who are refugees. And at the end, we learn what is the big picture plan of the Irish sub-commander, which is to install the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development as the president, with the at least current thinking that he is the highest ranking person in the chain of command. Now, we don't know that. That's what they're claiming. But that was a really interesting wrinkle. And then we also have Slattery, Adam Baldwin's character, and the folks on the ship trying to intercept the communication between the sub back to the folks on the mainland that's helping Chandler figure out where to go. They're also trying to figure out how to either tap into the communication and decrypt it or something. And eventually they just decide to break it, which I thought was cool because one of the things that I thought they did really well in this episode was sort of show the limitations of whatever's the current intelligence you have. And, you don't have the whole picture in the moment. So you're just making decisions based on what you currently know. So I like that a lot. And I like how they're breaking up the storyline. I like that there's more than one, problem that needs to be solved, and they're sort of divvying up the work. The team aspect is very important to this show, and I think that it was well done this episode as well.
Yeah, I'm still really enjoying this, but you can get this. Definitely get the sense watching it that they're building up to something. That this is almost like part 2 of part 3 or something. Did enjoy the fact that the ship actually got to do a little bit of work and take out the communication buoy that they were using to talk to the sub. So now they're cut off from the sub, which is good. If the sub wants to talk, it's going to have to get a lot closer and go up to communications depth, which makes it a target for the carrier, or for the destroyer. Pardon me. So good work there. The whole dilemma at the end, you can see it's a dilemma for the captain. I mean, if this guy really is the legitimate next in line to be president, what can Chandler do? But part of me is thinking, well, they take an oath when they join the military to protect and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And it looks to me like it's pretty clear he is being propped up as a puppet to an invading force. That makes him a domestic enemy of a foreign enemy, a domestic friend of a foreign enemy, if you will. Chandler has a lot of options here. I don't think he's just going to blindly obey this guy and fall in line and do what he wants, because obviously he's under the control of an enemy invader. So what is he going to do? He can ignore him. He can try to take him away from the puppet master and see what's going on. He can just declare that he is also an enemy and attack him too. I mean, there's a lot of dilemma going on here for Chandler, which I actually kind of enjoy. The fact that he's confronted for once and for all, because the whole time, he's had this, even though he hasn't been in direct communication with his chain of command, for the most part. I think he had like one bit in season 1 where they were able to talk to somebody or got an order. But it's been, the ship is the representation of the United States at this point. And, we are the chain of command, and we're going to, do what we took an oath to do and protect the country. And now he's faced finally with the possibility of, well, there might be a commander in chief, and he might be legitimate. And now what are we going to do? So I like that about it.
I didn't see it as, and kind of came across in our quick reviews, as one of the stronger episodes of the second season. But as you said, it's a point in the story where we're kind of setting up that bigger story of what's going on with these guys from the sub and the whole idea of creating a government situation. So it was good the way it's played out, but it's very much felt like, the first part of a two-parter that we're seeing the chess pieces set up and what it means, as you said, Brent, too, from the military side of it, since this guy does appear to be legit in the chain of command, or at least that's what it turns out when they get a chance to, if you will, authenticate that or drill it all down. So it was nice to see from the point of view of strategy how they're going to take their forces and split them up, when they were on the different buses, going out to see this, who's going to do what, and how they can still stay in communication without giving themselves away. So from a strategy point of view, it was kind of interesting. But it was, just a good episode that I'm hoping to see a lot more cool stuff from in the next bit.
Well, I mean, I don't know yet what we know about the actual HUD guy. Is he a bad guy, or is he just misguided, or is he sort of making do with the current ally he has, which is this Irish sub person, and maybe he'll recognize Chandler as a better ally and sort of switch teams or switch ideas. I don't know if it'll be immediately that this guy is a problem for Chandler. I don't know, because we don't know anything about him yet. He could just be a puppet to the Irish guy, so maybe Chandler can be like, well, maybe he can be our puppet instead. And not that Chandler has ambitions of, ruling behind the throne, but could redirect him in a better way, possibly. So I don't know. It didn't feel like part one-itis to me, but that could be because I had watched, I think it was one of the videos from San Diego Comic-Con where the showrunner was talking about how they basically want every episode to feel like not necessarily a cliffhanger, but that it's like the end of a chapter in a book and you want to turn the page. And for me, this show is still, as soon as it ends, I want to see the next episode. And I'm going to be really curious how this show does, in reruns or on Netflix and stuff where people might sit down and watch a bunch of episodes in a string, because I bet it actually works pretty well that way. The other show I wanted to talk about was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is episode 6, called Chapter 6, The Black Tower. And, Jonathan's gone to Crazy Town now. And in order to be able to contact the Fae guy that I believe is called the Gentleman, and he's actually created this giant black vortex over Venice, and everyone's alarmed. The Prime Minister comes to see Mr. Norrell and tells him, you've got to do something about this. The young woman and the father who had been helping Mr. Norrell come to see him, and he is able to sort of plant the seed that he's going to check back in with her later. He sends her a mirror that's covered, so hopefully she'll be able to help him out later. To me, this was just that this story's going. I don't know where the story's going, especially when we had the guy who's the servant of the gentleman helping the magician who'd been sort of the raving oracle, and he actually takes off his shirt and claims that this book of the three-eyed raven is actually written all over him. And I was very surprised and confused that the gentleman arrives and is able to get the magician to hang himself. So I was sort of like, how is this story going? I still don't know what's going on. But it's keeping me really intrigued.
Yeah, this show continues to be kind of crazy and in a good way. Reminds me a bit of almost a lighthearted version of Penny Dreadful in some regard. The events happening in Venice and his real, I love the end where he was actually went into that fantasy world and found his wife. And what's interesting is he also found the true Lady Pole, which I'm a little confused about. Is this just a spiritual world? But we saw that his wife's body was taken when it was replaced with a pod person. So I don't know if her body's there, their body's there. If her body is there, the Lady Pole's, then what is back in the asylum? I'm really kind of confused about that. But I am very, as you talked about just a minute ago about Last Ship and wanting to see the next episode, I really want to see how this one concludes. And I've been holding off. I have access to it, but I didn't jump into it immediately and watch it. I've been waiting until we talked about this one so I can immediately after this recording go figure out what the heck happens.
Very cool. You folks are enjoying it.
Well, I was thinking that it must be nighttime because that's why Lady Pole is there. because she always gets taken at nighttime in her dreams to that world. So that's why I was thinking she could be there. Because like even Kevin, isn't his name Kevin? The black servant. I think his name's Kevin. He can seem to go back and forth between both worlds, although it almost seems like the gentleman is just doing that. But so that was why I was thinking she could be at the party, because that's part of the dream, right? Is they're always at a ball from when she originally got turned.
Yeah, it's still interesting though.
Very interesting, yeah. And also when he meets his wife, and she doesn't really entirely know who he is, and the show has this really crazy energy right now that it's like, I don't know, it gives me anxiety in a good way, because I'm like, come on, let's make something happen, it's like, I want to help him. I want to help the guy and get his wife back. The last show I wanted to talk about is The Almighty Johnsons. This is the episode called Typical Auckland God. And we haven't talked about this show much lately, but at this point, Axel has already met his true father, who turned out to be not that great of a dad, and went off to a Korean tanker instead of taking him to Norsewood, which is where Axel had wanted to go and where he thought they were going. So along the way, he hitchhikes, and this weird guy picks him up. Axel has ditched his phone, and this weird guy drops him off in a place. He walks into a bar. He meets this woman named Susie, who's the barmaid, and they hit it off immediately. And it turns out they're in the same town as Derek, who is Thor. And I really like the whole storyline with Derek's character and this fight he's in with his neighbors who are gay, and he was in a bad mood and he didn't like their music, so he threw his hammer at their house. So he's lost the hammer and he's trying to get it back, and the neighbors are like, you have to apologize. And I just thought it was great, the way that they were trying to get him to apologize, and they invited him to their stag party, pre-hammer incident. So he's still invited, but he can only come if he wears his wife's wedding dress, which Derek is clearly in mourning for his wife. So it's really hard for him. He's originally, finds this incredibly offensive, but then he gets the talk from Axel about, look, you're failing at everything. Why are you doing this? And it actually makes him suicidal. There was a really nice scene where Axel's trying to basically browbeat him back into taking his responsibilities. And then he shows up, and Axel is willing to be his bridesmaid. So you have Axel in a bridesmaid's dress at this stag party. He won't apologize because he felt like he was being bullied. But instead, he sings this song, which was the love song he sang to his wife on their wedding day, as a sign of his good wishes for their marriage. And it turns out the actor has a really good voice. So to me, this was a great episode. It also showed some of the best sides of Axel's character out of it, too, which I really liked. But then at the end, he decides he needs to get back to Norsewood. It also turns out that the barmaid is Saga, another a goddess, I guess, who is Odin's best friend. They do sleep together a lot, but it's also like his best friend. So that was really interesting because, he has to go find his Frigg, but he kind of has like the perfect partner in his best friend character. So that could be problematic down the road, maybe. I don't know. But he gets dropped off in Norsewood and gets a note talking about, I think it's called the Jormungand or something. Something's coming. He gets a note, and also Mike is there, his brother, who apparently received a text message from him. But of course, Axel had thrown away his phone, and it was the weird guy who gave him the ride. So there's this mysterious guy who's trying to get Axel to to Norsewood to meet up with Mike, and then they're going to, finally go back home. So I really like this episode.
Yeah, and in hindsight, having seen the rest of it, I kind of know why the weird guy dropped him off there now, and I don't really want to talk about it because that would spoil some of the ending, but it was really fun to see him hook up with the goddess, the one who is his best friend. I love how Olaf describes her. It's like, imagine Zeb, but a chick and ready to do it with you or whatever.
Yeah.
He said.
It's always up for it, yeah.
Always up for it, yeah.
Oh, and endless beer.
Endless beer, yeah, I love that. But it was great to see Thor again and his story develop. And you did feel a lot for him by the end of it. At first, it was like, oh, he's just being, obstinate and a little prejudiced and so forth. But it turns out there's a lot more to it than that. And he was a lot deeper and he had a lot of pain. And it was good to see that that got to be pulled out a little bit. I did love where the title of the episode came from, though, where he's insulting Axel by calling him a typical Auckland god for one of his comments. But yeah, it was very heavy, Axel and what was going on around him, but, some good stuff with the other characters as well. Some more, Don and Ty stuff a little bit, not too much, but, a lot more of that's coming, but I don't want to say anymore because I'm just going to spoil things.
Yeah, this was very enjoyable. The last few episodes have been fun, but not really distinctive for the most part for me. But this one I could tell, not only did I enjoy it, but as you said, a lot of key pieces are happening here, and you get the hunch a lot of this is going to start really driving some other things. So it was a lot of fun, and it was also very enjoyable to see Axel get to be the one driving a lot of these things instead of just being the poor me kind of thing. So that was good too.
He is finally getting his focus back by the end of this episode. And Brent, you had mentioned the Ty and Dawn stuff. This is the episode where Olaf invites all these people over, and Anders invites Dawn and her bike messenger boyfriend Lance, and they also show up and sort of bust in on the date that Ty was going to have with the female bike messenger, who ends up leaving with Anders, of course. But Dawn is getting flashes of Ty. So she's getting some of her memories back. And also Ty gets really angry hearing her talk about Colin, who, they're working on his campaign. And he starts to freeze his wine glass, and he tells Olaf, and Olaf's telling him, well, maybe Hod, his god, wasn't really expelled. Maybe there's a little piece left over. And it seems like, he's getting his powers back.
Yeah, that was a very interesting aspect. And it also seemed, because he noticed he was getting his powers back prior to Dawn remembering bits. So that since she lost all her memories when he, quote unquote, lost the god, that getting it back is causing those memories to come flooding back to her. So what is that going to do? That's very setting up something very interesting, I hope.
Yes, indeed. And since I've watched a couple more episodes, I incredibly agree that it's leading somewhere. And that's going to be the end for me.
Awesome. Okay. I've got a couple things to talk about. First of all, I wanted to talk a bit about some rumors that are going around. These are Xena rumors. You've probably heard them. There's a couple of different rumors. There's one about a new Xena movie with the original cast, and then there's a talk that NBC is in early discussions about possibly rebooting Xena as a new series, NBC Universal. And there's also a link to a tweet from Lucy Lawless in here as well, where she's trying to tell everybody there's nothing about this rumor. But then you have to wonder, Lucy, what rumor are you talking about? You're talking about the movie, or you're talking about NBC rebooting the series? Because NBC is talking about rebooting the series with a brand new cast. Lucy Lawless wouldn't be involved, probably. So, not quite sure. So this is all rumors at this point, folks, although the NBC Universal reboot rumors seem to have a little insider knowledge, but nothing confirmed.
Yeah, this is one of those ones, folks, just step back and kind of wait to see where it might go, because it's too much conflicting info, or it's some good PR to get the topic thrown around for the sake of visibility. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it almost seems like a sort of weird coincidence, but maybe not so weird because of who Lucy Lawless is married to in real life, who's, one of the folks involved with, Xena and the reboot with NBC. So, maybe she was speaking too soon for the negotiations that are going on or not, because, I think it's Rob Tapert is her husband, and he and Sam Raimi are supposedly involved, according to the Hollywood Reporter, that, they're working with NBC on this reboot, but then you get the Lucy Lawless part, so who knows? I'm just really hopeful that it's actually true, that there's something of Xena that could be, rebooted, brought back. I would love it if there was even just a movie that included Lucy Lawless and, the original characters, Gabrielle and Joxer and stuff. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and if you carefully parse Lucy's tweet, she's not necessarily saying it'll never happen or that it's not in early discussions. She's basically saying, nothing is formal. She's basically saying so. You can read into it what you want.
Yeah, I'm thinking she let the cat out of the bag too soon.
All right, another link I have too is yet another one of these X-Files teasers. I joked last week about how fans would identify a cigarette as the brand that the cigarette smoking man smoked, and they get all excited. But this one actually had a little bit. I mean, it's still very small, very short. A lot of old stuff too, but a little bit of dialogue, actual dialogue between current day Mulder and Scully. One line each, I think, between the two of them. And we get to see them actually say them to each other. So it's in that regard, it's a lot more than we've gotten in the past.
And yes, in the sense that it's more than we had before, and hopefully it means the next one will have even more than this one. So it is very cool, and they're not like, what was it, Scream Queens that gave us like 7 straight crappy 10-second teasers. At least they're giving us a little more each time, even if it's not a lot. Because as we mentioned between us in email, or I mentioned, we're still several months away, so that's okay. You can do a slow build up here. I'm okay.
I'm fine with this because it's like, oh, shiny, something new. I totally agree. It doesn't add up to anything yet, but each time we get something more. So it's not giving away anything, but it's building the anticipation. And every week they can add 1 more second to whatever they send out, and I will be happy and smiling every time I open that present.
All right. Well, I did want to talk a bit about Dark Matter, the episode that aired this week. And this one was, first of all, 1 continues to be a little jealous of 3 and and being able to sleep with 2, who he's definitely attracted to. And we find out in this episode, thanks to before she turns evil, the other bot, the entertainment bot, pointing out that 2 particularly has a physiological reaction to seeing and being around 1 that indicates she has feelings for 1 too, and she knows that. She can feel the feelings, but she's been trying to kind of avoid it. And I love in the beginning, of course, she completely torments and teases 2 by basically being completely naked and dressing in front of him while he's trying to avert his eyes. But at the end, she closes his door, and then it looks like they're going to give in to their mutual feelings for one another, 1 and 2, which is pretty good. We get to learn a little bit more about 3 because they finally open that door, the big door, because 5 had remembered the code phrase that 6 had put on the door to lock it, the password. So they use it, they open the door, and they find out that there's another sleeper, hibernation chamber in there. And it's got a woman in it, and they revive her thinking that she might know what's going on. And it turns out she's got a disease, a very fatal disease. She's, potentially days away from dying. And if they revive her, she may not live long. And she has her memories because she was disconnected. She had no data connection to the ship. So she wasn't infected with the same virus. And she gives us a backstory on 3 where she finds him almost dead. He was a mercenary on some mission, and the team, he never rendezvoused with the team, so they figured he was dead, but she drags him back to her cabin. She's a widow. She nurses him back to health. He repays the kindness. They actually fall in love. And when she becomes ill, he's the one who puts her in stasis to try to find some way to save her. And as she gets very ill on the ship and is near death, he puts her back in there. But unfortunately, there's a power failure. That kind of bummed me out because I kind of wanted her to be there as a potential character to come back at some point. But the power failure affects the stasis chamber, and she basically expires, and she's dead, which is kind of sad. But we do also get this entertainment bot, which was in a locked container that they open up and put back together, and get a lot of kind of fun interactions with her because she's meant to do everything that can to please people. And that includes sex, but it also includes dancing and just partying and maybe even making food, which she does. She turns rations into some really good meals for people to make them excited to lighten their day. But then she turns evil because she was actually planted on the ship by an enemy of the crew. And she basically captures everybody, takes over the ship, and directs it towards the nearest star. So there's a bit of back and forth there. And we even get a sequence where the ship android, who shows a little bit more humanity, a little bit more emotion, and actually seems to be a little jealous of the the attention that the entertainment bot is getting, and she tries to do it too. She unzips her top a little bit and starts throwing out accents, and it doesn't seem to work. So she zips the top back up and goes back to her job, and actually apologizes to the entertainment bot for being jealous. But right before the entertainment bot shoots her and immobilizes her and takes over the ship. So. It was a pretty fun episode, but, nothing really great and big on the overall arc, a little bit more on 3, but it was fun.
I think the part I liked best about this episode, and you and I touched on it real quickly before we started recording, is the tone was different. I mean, Dark Matter's been a little too, I don't want to say by the book, but a little too matter-of-fact, kind of very middle of the road. Not that I haven't liked it, but I wasn't really loving it and so forth. This one had a lot more fun. As you said, Brad, almost a little bit of a Farscape vibe to it. You had a little humor. There was a new character or two thrown in. That I'm sure that certainly helped in getting to see 3 in a different light. So it was kind of, okay, maybe if we're going to start to mix things a little bit, this might get a lot more interesting from here. The fact that they found so much cool stuff in that locked room means they're not quite as desolate for food and money and so forth. So it might create that dynamic too. So it was kind of interesting and could be a lot of fun going forward from here. So I take it as hopefully a nice little turn in a more interesting direction for me.
Well, I was definitely, they've had this flirting going on between number 1 and number 2, and number 2 sort of always has the upper hand with him, and that was definitely the case in the beginning of the episode. But by the end, they finally hooked them up. It's like, okay, they can be hooked up. I don't need so much focus on whether they're gonna be a couple or not. I kind of would like to move on to other places, but I did really like that the number 3 character developments that we had once they wake up this woman, because in hindsight, that maybe he did have a lingering echo of that, because from the very beginning, as soon as they woke up, he's the one who's been trying to get in that door. And I had thought it was because he thinks that there's, treasure inside or something, but she's in there. So I liked that they finally sort of maybe explained what was motivating him, even if he doesn't realize it was motivating him. And I had definitely not liked number 3 in the beginning, because he seemed like the most cookie-cutter, cliche kind of a character we had, and they finally sort of gave him a dimension that was interesting to me. So I was also pretty bummed when they killed this woman off so quickly, because that seemed like a lot of potential for some interesting character dynamics if she had stuck around and maybe just been ill for a couple more episodes. But that might have created some tension about decisions related to her being ill versus other priorities that the crew or the ship might have had. So I definitely found that really interesting. I also like that, they got the door open and it turns out there's I'll call it a box full of story that they can generate from that. But they certainly have what they need to sustain themselves in terms of weapons and food and some other valuables and stuff. I do agree that they put a lot more sort of lighthearted moments. Everything wasn't dire in this episode until the bot took control of the ship and was zooming it towards the sun. But up until then, there really wasn't any big problem happening for them, besides the woman who was sick. I really liked when, number 1 and number 6 are talking to the entertainment bot, and they're just the way they're reacting to all of her open-ended statements. And then when she cooks and she's like, well, that's just the first course and there's going to be another one. And when, number 4, who seems to be the only thing he does is, wield knives in his bedroom, she comes in and is like, you have this alignment problem in your shoulder, and she starts giving a massage. So I liked all that stuff a lot. I was bummed, though, that, they killed that character off, because I did like the idea that they were maybe going to have another robot on the show who would have a different kind of a function. I know that they did all the humor stuff with the android being jealous, and also because the actor can do all those accents, but that didn't work for me, because that jealousy emotion didn't work for me as something that the android was supposed to have or had ever had. So I get why they did it. It was kind of irresistible to do, but it seemed like it was just jammed in there to me.
There is actually a chance that we could get the entertainment bot back. We know that 2 ordered the body to be spaced, but
they have
we never saw that happen. And they have the head. We never saw the body get spaced, and they have the head. And you know how 5 likes to tinker with things, so we might see her again.
That's possible.
Okay.
Her name was Wendy, too.
Yeah.
Which characters are never named Wendy in shows, so I was really bummed when she turned evil.
Oh, her name's not Gianna? Oh. All right, I did also want to talk about Continuum. We were on the rewatch, and we have reached the end of the new episodes of Continuum, which is both a good and a bad thing. Good thing because it's one of the craziest seasons, greatest episodes of the show, and bad because we have to wait for the final season, to come in a little bit, in a couple of months. But this episode, has everybody at the end of the last episode, they seem to be like, okay, we're done with this. We're done. We can't change anything. We're going on our own ways. And they want to go on their own ways, but unfortunately, alternate timeline Alec is off, and they're trying to leave, and they get shot up, and it looks like Pyron Alec is trying to kill them. So they have to come back, and you get the scene where Kira and Brad are setting up shop in the cabin. It looks like they're settling down to a life together, and here come the kids. The kids have returned home, and so they have to set up some kind of scheme. And you get this great sequence where Kira teams up with the remaining members of Liberate, and without us knowing it until later on, Carlos as well, to do a big sort of sting sort of swap operation where they try to put the good Alec in place of the Pyron Alec. So that he can do whatever he needs to do, get information and so forth, and sabotage the efforts of Pyron Alec. But that all kind of falls apart too, because Pyron Alec was so paranoid that he had implanted a chip that his security team used to determine that where he was and to rescue him, and everything falls apart, and you get the 2 Alecs fighting to the death, as it turns out. Which I really didn't expect the first time I saw this. I did not think there would be a death here, that one of the Alecs would die, and I definitely didn't think he would die pretty much at his own hands. Even though he had been stabbed in the neck, he could have probably, been taken somewhere and saved, but he actually pulls the thing out and bleeds to death on the rooftop after almost cursing Kira's name. It's one of those 2 Kirks in Star Trek things where you have to kind of keep track of who is who. But this time along, I made sure to note that the good Alec had the zipper of his hoodie down, and the bad Alec had it all the way up to his neck. And I was using that to kind of track who was who here, to make sure that they didn't screw up the continuity at all. And our good Alec was the one who survived, and sure enough, he was. And he instead of just running off, which was the plan, everybody was going to disappear again, he decided, no, I got to stay at Pyron. I got to make sure that the future doesn't happen. And it looks like the future isn't going to happen, because Brad meets up with Kira again, and they use the beacon device that was going to send a signal to the future. And if nobody receives it, that means the future didn't happen. The future that built that beacon didn't happen. The horrible future that Brad was from. And initially, nobody responds, and that's when Alec is still at Pyron's helm, and then slowly we see Kellogg take over, and kick him off the throne and take over the company. And as soon as that happens, the bad guys show up from the beacon. Well, I don't know if they're the bad guys. I mean, it looks like they're going to kick some butt with their mechanized armored suits. And I just love that final line. I still love it to this day of Kira saying, "What do we do now?" and Brad saying, "Run." It's just a great way to end a series. Season, pardon me.
Yeah, oh goodness, so much good stuff here. So much. And a lot of that, as we said, throughout this whole rewatch is paid off on the rewatch for appreciating it. I mean, early on, when they realize, or Kira realizes they're going to have to do something to stop Pyron Alec, so they're teaming up with all of the remaining Liberate folks. Just seeing Kira and Travis going to see Lucas and Garza, and Lucas just looking around the room and seeing all of them there. And he's just so happy that, hey, whatever this is, I'm totally in, just realizing that they're working together. Kira's complete admission that, yes, from way back in, the first season discussions with Garza and everybody else, she was asleep, but they all have a common purpose to work together. I mean, after seeing so much of them on opposite sides and seeing how the gray areas get grayer and the black and the white disappears, to have them working together after 3 seasons, it's just pretty cool to be able to do that legitimately from a story point of view. So that was just wonderful stuff, along with all of the plot things you pointed out. Again, where this show is really good, the little character bits. When Kira and Carlos, when Carlos was, we realized Carlos was in on this and he was part of what was going to go on, and they're exchanging some information as they're doing stuff. Carlos makes some comment about him being, Commissioner Gordon, and she remembers the reference but can't remember the exact universe that fit in. That whole thing was just lovely to call back to that. And even aside from the coolness of the time Marines or Space Marines, whatever they were that appeared, whatever their correct description, from the plot stuff point of view, too, the fact that Kellogg pulled the rug out from underneath both Alex and has been doing paperwork, so he's the one taking over Pyron. That's left dangling as we go into the final season. And Curtis, too, he's back at the old-time, freelancer location, and he's got the Traveler with him. And the Traveler says, as we just before that stuff with the Marines happened, it has begun. So even those pieces are going to be playing forward towards season 4. So, we're excited we have it back, but oh my goodness, how are we going to fit all of this in 6 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of questions at the end of this, and seeing it all fall apart, that's completely undoes pretty much every time travel show ever. It's like, well, let's try the gizmo and see if we saved history. And, for 5 seconds, it seems like we did, and then we didn't. I loved how everybody had their part to play in all of the lead up to kidnapping, I'll call him Bad Alec. And, now we have the future Alec is the one who's alive. And so, everything's wonky now. It's Brad's timeline who, we don't know anything that's going on. And Kellogg is a big wild card because in the future, Brad was, working for him essentially. And he even said that when they met in the episode the prior week when they were all in that construction room. When they had, Garza had thrown the nail gun into Kira's foot, to sort of find out what was going on. So you have these interesting alliances that happen. They did a great job with, setting up the scene where Kira's talking about how, we have to, nothing's set by this history. We have to all work together. And it ends with the camera on Travis, that they're all strange bedfellows, and that kind of continues when later they're looking around the room, Kira and Brad, and they're sort of like, is this a good idea? I like that. I also really like how, Lucas is always the sort of the crazy, brilliant guy. You know, he's the one who shows up and interrupts Alec's presentation and talks about how, you know, Halo is a lie, it's a shackle. I loved Carlos's involvement because he's playing it like he's there to give Alec security, and then Alec is like, this is like kidnapping, and Carlos like, no, it's exactly like it is kidnapping. So I love that. There was great suspense all the way going up to the fight on the roof, because as you mentioned, Brent, it wasn't entirely clear who was who. Like, one of them had something on their forehead, and that was kind of the only trigger for me to know who was who. And, you know, I'm a big Kira and Brad shipper, so I liked in the beginning how their relationships obviously progressed, because Kira's already talking about how it's going to end badly. And she makes a really interesting comment about her son and how he feels closer to her. So I'm wondering if she's already pregnant at this point, which would be interesting.
Ooh, I hadn't thought of that.
I mean, they definitely have slept together, so...
Yeah, but didn't she probably had some kind of like futuristic permanent birth control implant or something, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
who knows? Accidents probably still happen in the future.
Okay.
You know, he doesn't have one, maybe. Who knows? But anyway, things look bad. And then even worse when these future military guys show up, and you know, I hope the beginning starts with them running. Yeah.
Right where it ended. That would be awesome, yeah. All right, well, that was great discussion. I'm really looking forward to the next episode's continuum. I think we all are, but we're going to have to say goodbye for this episode. We wanted to let you guys know here that our schedules are a little tight, so we're actually going to be skipping a week of the regular show. I think we have a couple of other programs coming out on the feed, but you're not going to get a regular show in the last call this coming week. We apologize, but we will resume our schedule a week from now. I want to thank everybody for listening every week, and Kevin and Winnie for being here, and I'll catch you next time.
Have a great week, gang.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
We offer several ways for you to get in touch with us. If you come to our website at tuningintoscifitv.com, you can leave a comment on any of our blog posts. There's also a link there over to our discussion forums. You can send us email at feedback@tuningintoscifitv.com. You can leave us voicemail by dialing 206-202-4182, or also on Skype at Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/tuningintosci-fi, or visit our Facebook fan page by following the link on our website.
Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV was hosted by Kevin Batchelder, Wendy Hembrock, and Brent Barrett. The theme music for Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV is by Beatnik Turtle. Used with permission. Listen to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV on Stitcher Radio on Demand. Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. You've been listening to the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Last Call for episode 346, recorded July 25th, 2015.